As a kid, a visit to a games arcade was pure excitement. Here in the UK, I'm not sure the arcade scene was ever as big as in the USA or Japan. So a visit to the arcade was largely something I'd experienced on a seaside holiday or places such as bowling alleys. That just made the experience all the more compelling. And every time we did visit an arcade, I'd end up spending a ton of my pocket money. Fortunately, in the 80s and early 90s, most machines were priced about 10p a go, so a pound could go a long way, depending on the game of course. But there were always games that attracted my attention the most. So today, I'd like to reminisce about
the arcade games that took most of my cash. Smash TV.
Smash TV was a fast, frenetic, furious and frenzied twin-stick shooter, but it could also soak up my pocket money like a sponge. Chaotic was the first word that came to mind when I thought of this game. There's bizarre bosses, mobs of people, and God knows what trying to end your success. This was a noisy machine, with loud sounds and fantastic voice samples.
Good luck! You'll need it!
All themed around a futuristic and violent game show called Smash TV. It was never easy, and I'd usually fail a lot, meaning more pocket money into the machine. Still, this was a great game, best played in co-op, and one I could never avoid if a cabinet was available.
Berserk.
Certain arcade games have a strong one more go factor. Berserk is one of those games. It looks visually basic today, but the gameplay still holds up. And much like Smash TV, you view the game from a top-down perspective and work through a maze. Each maze is filled with slow-moving but increasingly accurate robots trying to blast you. The walls themselves are electric, so must be avoided, and there's a sense of urgency despite the slow pace as a bouncing ball enemy eventually chases you across the screen. Like most arcade games, it's not easy, and you'll fail a fair amount. But games like Berserk never deterred me from trying again and again as I watched my money depleting.
Bubble Bobble.
The name alone always intrigued me, long before I ever saw an actual cabinet. And as a kid, I wanted to know what exactly is a Bubble Bobble, but at the time, I don't think I really got an answer. But that music, catchy as hell, and I found myself humming the tune long after I'd finished playing. I suppose this is a platform game of sorts, but what really was different here was that you had to trap your enemies in bubbles that your character spits out, which left you with a sense of urgency because you had to then pop the bubble to remove the enemy permanently from screen. However, the main focus of the game was to clear all 100 levels, each increasing in difficulty, complexity, and the variety of enemies you'll face. One coin could actually go a fair distance here as you improved and found successful strategies for clearing the screens, but still, I wasn't particularly good at it, so I would put a fair few coins into this one.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game.
I'm a huge Turtles fan, and I first encountered this machine at a campsite in Devon. They had a large arcade on site, and in the mornings I'd head over to play a few machines. This game always drew a crowd with the other kids, so it was easy to find 3 other players and experience this at its best. You could, at various points, lose lives quite quickly, but I didn't mind. This was fun and allowed me to play as my favourite turtles, Michelangelo or Donatello. And for the time, the graphics were incredible and the gameplay is still great today. The home conversions never really held up, so any chance I got, I played this machine wherever it was available.
Baseball Stars 2.
Being from the UK, I'm not a baseball fan, but comic-style games based on baseball always appeal. And I only ever came across this machine in one location, and that was in Devon while on holiday. Unlike most arcade games, this was a little different than other games in that you paid for a set amount of playtime. So if you wanted to play for a good amount of time, you could actually calculate how much money you'd need to spend. But I think what first caught my attention with this was the animation if a pitch hit the batter. You'd run up the screen and sucker punch the pitcher, and it just looked so fun. But the game itself was fast paced, tricky to actually hit the ball, but completely satisfying when you achieved a home run. And as I only ever saw this game while on holiday, I'd play it as much as possible until one holiday it had disappeared.
Donkey Kong.
I suppose the only donkey in this game was the one playing it, me. I was pretty terrible at this as a kid, not much better today, but I can reach around 125,000 on a real cabinet. This is a punishing game, but compelling to play. At the time, having different levels or boards in a game was pretty unique as well, but it was the barrel levels that always appealed to me the most. The idea of a giant ape throwing barrels you had to jump over was really quite cool. But as fun and seemingly simple as this was, you could quickly lose to Donkey Kong. So depending on your skill, you could spend a chunk of change on this one quite quickly. The idea that people can hit scores in the millions baffles me. How many coins did they spend in an arcade to get that good?
Outrun.
The first time I saw Outrun, there were two sit-down cabinets side by side, and I looked at the cool kids playing this bright and colourful racing game, and I just knew I had to play it. I was probably around 8 or 9 at the time, so obviously driving a Ferrari wasn't my thing yet, and I think I was a little confused by what gears were and probably left it in low and drove way too slowly. But after a few goes, I got the hang of things and was flying along, watching the woman's hair blowing in the wind. I was driving a car. At least it felt like it for a young boy. The great thing about Outrun was that even if you were terrible, you got a decent amount of playtime, and it definitely had that one more go factor. It's still great today, and the follow-up, Outrun 2, is one of my favourite all-time racing games.
The Simpsons arcade game.
The Simpsons arcade machine announced its presence with just one word. But those graphics were superb. It looked like a Simpsons game should. Bright, colourful, and well animated. With its 4-player gameplay, this always attracted a crowd. In many ways, it was much like a refinement of the Turtles arcade game, but this was way crazier and didn't make much sense in context with the TV show. But I didn't question the story. It was the best Simpsons game around at the time. And just like every game on this list, whenever one of these machines was available, I couldn't resist seeing how far I could get in the game. So, those were the games that I always made a beeline towards. But arcades didn't always host the games you wanted or desired. There were a ton of arcade games I wanted to play, but just never saw them in the real world. It was total luck of the draw. But I'm also interested to hear the games you always played, the ones you spent a ton of money on, and whether any of the games I've listed you also played a lot. As always, a like, share, or subscription is very much appreciated. And a big thanks goes to everyone who has recently subscribed. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.